Hello, I'm Dan, and today I'm reacting to Marvel's Cloak and Dagger Season 1, Episode 6, Funhouse Mirrors. These are my very first off-the-cuff reactions, just finished watching the episode live, and I thought it was a cool episode. I have a lot of positive things to say, but I also have some sort of worries about the season as it is going so far, and the pacing and things like that, which I'll get back to in a little bit. But first I want to talk a little bit about this idea of Funhouse Mirrors in the title. My assumption being is that we're seeing sort of altered, off versions of a lot of our characters. We have Dwayne as the Funhouse version of Tyrone. Basically, they're both sort of reeling from the loss of Billy, and for one, it led into one direction, and one led into a very distorted, like, this is the worst it could have gone for Tyrone viewpoint. Similarly, we have Tandy and Mina, where Mina is kind of actually the better case scenario version of Tandy. It's like, oh, she lost her father in a way in this accident. She was inspired by his work. Her whole family didn't collapse under what happened. They didn't lose all their money. She was able to go off and learn and continue his work and use her scientific skills to try to make something great out of his name. That family name was not tarnished in the same way that Tandy's was. So it's like what life she could have had, who she could have been if things hadn't gone that way. And then I think you could even say that O'Reilly and Connors are sort of mirror images of each other. What O'Reilly could become if she let herself get too sucked into the idea of going undercover and thought too much like the bad guys and became one. They talk about that. So I thought that was cool. All these parallels. The show's really good with their themes and their sort of philosophy and how they carry that out through multiple storylines. Speaking about carrying things throughout multiple storylines, we have throughout the episode this sort of framing device of Evita and her aunt doing this sort of voodoo prophecy incantation, not you know what I'm talking about, future reading. And I thought that was interesting. I do again like that they give an extra layer of Evita's not just the girlfriend. She has a connection to a bigger world, which again expands the feeling in the world of New Orleans, and especially because they bring up things like Katrina, and they talk about all the things that New Orleans has had to deal with throughout the years and the cycle continuing, and then they draw it into this supernatural mysticism place of the divine pair and one of them will live, one of them will die. Who is the other part of the pair? I thought that was interesting. I am interested in the fact is like, I'm pretty sure the show is supposed to take place in the MCU, but the way they're writing it, a lot of it feels like, are these the only two people who are supposed to have abilities like in their world? Because if I hadn't been told that it was in the MCU, which I could be wrong about, let me know. I would assume they're the only two people, and I'm like, but it's like, that would be helpful to know if there were other people, because it would help people make me understand how I'm supposed to see them taking and learning about their abilities and other people seeing their abilities. Like, is this something that no one's ever seen anything like this before? Or is this like, oh, you're one of those? And especially because it's like, not only are they these two powered people, but like they're so pivotally, spiritually important as this divine legend. It almost seems like they're supposed to be unique. And I'm interested to see whether there is ever going to be other people with powers on the show. And I don't know how I'd feel about the show if it never did. I mean, it certainly doesn't seem like right now they're going to. It's like, oh, we are two down our luck underdogs who need the powers because we're taking on things much bigger than ourselves. I'm like, okay, that's cool, especially for season 1. But I'm wondering as we go into later seasons if they're going to be able to keep that going and having it feel not kind of odd that there aren't any other powered people, but we'll see. I mean, we already sort of have these prophets, right? So, or future readers, and I guess that's a power in of itself. But meanwhile, we have two undercover things happening. We have Tandy going undercover as Mina's intern, and that sort of blowing up in her face. And then Tyrone, at Tandy's suggestion, trying to go undercover with Dwayne as like one of his drug runners. Now, both of these stories sort of hit the fan faster than I would have expected in some ways. Mina shrewdly figuring out what's going on with Tandy, but nicely that still led into an interesting thing for next week with Tandy meeting Mina's dad, which is setting up a potentially really cool episode. We'll talk more about that later based on the promo. It looks really cool. And then we have Tyrone's whole thing with Dwayne, which when we set up Dwayne as like a big bad last episode, and then him being killed off, especially by O'Reilly, and it hurting Tyrone, I thought was really interesting. And especially it adds an extra interesting layer of a cop killing a black guy, but this time it's a cop we like and a black guy that's morally dubious. So I'm interested to see what the show does with that. And I mean, I don't know if they'll really talk about it because, I mean, obviously the guy was pointing a gun at O'Reilly, so it's like, I get where she's coming from. But it just given the sort of social discussions and undertones the show has had so far, I think it would be interesting to talk about that parallel, especially with the two main cops killing, two black men in very different ways. So, I mean, that was interesting. The fact that they made Dwayne more sympathetic, even though he is fucked up and everything, he's done some crappy shit, like, you kind of get where he's coming from to a little. I mean, I don't agree with him in any way, but like, he has depth. He really does care about Billy, and he doesn't believe there is any justice for people like him. I think that's, all the more tragic the way he died. And I think that's going to make some really interesting stuff for Tyrone going forward. And I'm excited to see that, it seems like we end the episode Tyrone and Tandy together again, and it seems from the promo like they're going to get a lot more of them together in action, using their powers together next week, and I'm excited to see that. In addition, I liked that we had evolution of Tyrone's powers in this episode, both with seeing him actually, sort of teleporting around, but also not just seeing someone's nightmares, but showing them their nightmares, which is a really cool, creepy thing that he can do, and I'm excited to see that used in interesting ways going forward. I think we're continuing to see great music from the show, great performances from the two leads. I liked Mina's character. Dwayne did a good job with what he was given, this little amount of screen time, and I do think it's interesting how the show isn't afraid to kill off these seemingly important characters, so there is a feeling of like, what's going to happen, and they are doing a good job with twists and turns. That said, I am sort of interested to see if anybody else is feeling a little bit off about the show right now. I do think this was a good episode, but it is feeling very slow for me. And I think that is by design. I think they're trying to go for a different kind of superhero show. I think they don't want the action-packed thing. They're going for a more slow-paced, human, grounded character story. And I like that. I just think that there needs to be a little bit more forward momentum, and a little bit more fun, which is part of why I'm excited about next week, where it's like, it looks like they're fighting together, stuck in a repetitious nightmare. Like, that seems like a fun episode of TV, and I'm excited to be able to have that in addition to just the sort of plotting character stuff. Like, I think that the pilot, to me, had a good mix of fun and serious, where we have like the robberies and things like that. But I feel like we started to lose a little bit of the fun, and I definitely am like, okay, we're 6 episodes in, I want to see a little bit more of these powers. I want to feel a little bit more like a superhero show. Not to say that, like, I still think that the overall idea of focusing on character is great and being different is great. I just think to find that balance, again, it's a personal thing. So maybe for other people, the balance is great. But for me, I'm like, I want a little bit more momentum. And also, like, when we're seeing just their personal lives, we're not seeing that much of just normal life from them either. We're seeing a lot of them going undercover and following people and stuff like that. And I'm like, that isn't moving fast enough to me for that part to be interesting enough, where I'm like, I'd like to see more stuff like Tyrone going with his dad, and more just like relatable things, because if I'm not getting cool superhero stuff, then I at least want like relatable human stories. And there is some stuff like that, but we're in this murky area between spaces where I guess I don't know where I'm feeling. I feel like there's so much potential in the show, and I want it to be like one of my favorite shows on TV, and I think it can be, but I think that there is still a little bit, there's a little bit something off that I'm starting to feel, and I hope that they change my mind, that it turns that corner. And let me know if anybody else is feeling that way, if you think I'm crazy. Is it one of your favorite shows? Do you think it's like one of the best superhero shows? Because when I watched the 2-hour premiere, I was like, this is a standout. I love this. Now, 6 episodes in, I'm like, I like the show a lot. I really do enjoy it, but I'm like, I don't know how this season's gonna feel altogether? Is it going to be, you know, lesser than the sum of its parts? We'll see. I don't know. Everybody feels differently, and I'm excited to hear what people think is working, isn't working. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.